She moved between the worn vinyl booths with practiced efficiency, refilling coffee cups and clearing plates with the automatic grace of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. The diner smelled like it always did: coffee, frying oil, and that peculiar mixture of cleaning products and old upholstery that seemed to be the signature scent of every late-night establishment in New York City. "Table 7 needs ketchup, honey," called out Sal from behind the counter. He was 65, had owned Murphy's for 30 years, and treated Emma like the daughter he'd never had. "And you look dead on your feet. Why don't you take 5? Emma managed a tired smile as she grabbed the ketchup bottle. "I'm fine, Sal. Only 2 more hours until closing. Only 2 more hours." Then she could go home to her studio apartment in Sunset Park, heat up some leftover rice, and maybe, if she wasn't too exhausted, look at the nursing school applications she'd been putting off for months. The same applications that seemed more like impossible dreams than actual possibilities. The diner was nearly empty now. Just old Mr. Chen reading his newspaper in the corner booth where he sat every night. A young couple sharing fries and looking at each other like they were the only 2 people in the world. And a businessman in booth 12 who'd been nursing the same cup of coffee for the past hour. Emma had noticed him the moment he walked in. It was hard not to. He carried himself differently than most of the people who came into Murphy's at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night. Everything about him was controlled, deliberate. His coat was expensive. She could tell by the way it draped over his shoulders. His watch caught the fluorescent light every time he lifted his coffee cup, a subtle flash of silver that probably cost more than she made in 6 months. He was older than her, probably late 30s, with dark hair touched with gray at the temples, and eyes that seemed to notice everything while revealing nothing. Handsome in that intimidating way that made Emma feel self-conscious about the coffee stain on her uniform and the way her hair was escaping from her ponytail. He'd been polite when she took his order. Just coffee and the meatloaf special. He'd said thank you in a voice that was quiet but commanded attention, and he'd left her alone after that, occasionally typing on his phone with the focused attention of someone handling important business. Emma had learned not to wonder too much about the customers who came through Murphy's doors. Everyone had their own story, their own reasons for being here. She had enough to worry about without adding other people's problems to the list. She was wiping down table 3 when the bell above the door chimed. 2 men walked in, and something in Emma's stomach tightened instinctively. Maybe it was the way they moved. Too purposeful, too focused. Maybe it was the way they scanned the room before their eyes locked onto booth 12. Maybe it was just that 6th sense you develop when you've spent enough time working late nights in a city that can turn dangerous without warning. The temperature in the diner seemed to drop 10 degrees. Sal looked up from where he was cleaning the grill, his usual friendly expression shifting to something more cautious. Mr. Chen's newspaper rustled as he glanced over the top, then slowly folded it and set it down. The young couple didn't notice anything, too wrapped up in their own world. The businessman in booth 12 noticed. Emma saw his shoulders tense slightly, saw the way his hand moved carefully to set down his coffee cup, but his face remained perfectly calm, almost bored. The 2 men walked straight toward him. They weren't rushing, but there was something predatory about their approach. One was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a leather jacket that had seen better days. The other was shorter, wiry, with quick eyes that kept darting around the diner. Emma's heart started beating faster. She'd lived in New York her whole life. She knew when something was wrong. "Excuse me, gentlemen," Sal called out, his voice carrying that forced cheerfulness that barely masked concern. "What can I get for you? Coffee? Pie?" The tall one ignored him completely. They stopped at booth 12, and Emma saw the businessman slowly look up at them, with an expression of mild curiosity, as if 2 threatening strangers interrupting his meal was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. "Mr. Moretti," the tall one said, and his voice had an edge to it that made Emma's skin prickle. "We need you to come with us. Our boss wants to have a conversation." The businessman, Moretti apparently, took a slow sip of his coffee before responding. "I'm in the middle of dinner. Tell Castellano if he wants to talk he can make an appointment through proper channels." Emma was frozen near table 5, cloth still in her hand, watching this scene unfold with growing dread. She should move. She should go to the back, get away from whatever this was, but her feet wouldn't cooperate. "It wasn't a request," the shorter man said, and his hand moved to his jacket. Everything happened in slow motion, and too fast at the same time. The shorter man pulled out something that gleamed under the lights, metal, sharp, dangerous. Emma's breath caught in her throat. The young couple saw it, and the girl screamed. A short, sharp sound that cut through the air. Her boyfriend pulled her down under the table. Mr. Chen was already moving toward the door, faster than Emma would have thought possible for a man his age. Sal reached for the phone behind the counter, his hands shaking. Moretti didn't move. He sat there calmly, looking at the weapon being pointed at him like it was nothing more interesting than a menu. "You really want to do this here?" he asked quietly. "In front of witnesses?" "We'll handle the witnesses," the tall one growled. And that's when Emma moved. She didn't think about it, didn't plan it. Her mother used to say she had more bravery than sense, and maybe that was true. But what she saw in that moment wasn't a businessman in an expensive coat. She saw someone who might not leave this diner alive. She saw herself standing by and doing nothing, and she knew she couldn't live with that. The coffee pot was still in her hand from refills. It was nearly full, still hot from sitting on the burner. Emma took 3 quick steps forward and threw it. The scalding liquid hit the shorter man directly in the face and chest. He yelled, a sound of shock and pain, and stumbled backward, his hand releasing the weapon instinctively as he clutched at his face. For a split second, everyone froze in surprise. Then chaos erupted. The tall man lunged toward her, fury contorting his features. Emma stumbled backward, her hip hitting a table hard enough to bruise. She grabbed the heavy plastic tray from the nearest booth and swung it with all her strength. It connected with the side of his head with a hollow thud that made her arms vibrate. He staggered but didn't go down. His hand shot out and caught her wrist, squeezing hard enough to make her gasp. Emma tried to pull away, her heart hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears. Then Moretti was there. He moved with a speed and precision that seemed impossible for someone who'd been sitting calmly drinking coffee moments before. His hand clamped on the tall man's shoulder, yanking him away from Emma with enough force to send him crashing into the adjacent booth. The shorter man had recovered enough to be dangerous again, still blinking tears from his scalded face, reaching for the weapon he'd dropped. But Moretti was faster. He kicked it across the floor where it skittered under the counter, then stepped between Emma and the 2 men. "Leave," Moretti said. Just one word, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. "Tell Castellano this conversation is over. If he wants to try again, he knows how to find me, but not here, not like this." The tall man pulled himself up, touching his head where Emma had hit him. His eyes were full of rage, but something else too. Calculation. He looked at Moretti, then at Emma, then back at Moretti. "This isn't finished," he said. "It is for tonight," Moretti replied, his voice never rising above conversational level. But there was steel underneath it, unmistakable and uncompromising. For a moment, Emma thought they might rush forward anyway. Her whole body was shaking with adrenaline, her mind racing through terrible possibilities. But then the shorter man tugged on his companion's sleeve, muttering something she couldn't hear. They backed toward the door, the tall one never taking his eyes off Moretti. "You're making a mistake, protecting her. She's seen too much now. Then she's under my protection," Moretti said simply, "which means touching her would be touching me. Spread that word." The bell chimed as they left, disappearing into the rainy night. Through the window, Emma saw them climb into a dark car that sped away, tires hissing on the wet pavement. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma's legs gave out, and she sat down hard on the nearest chair. Her hands were trembling so badly she had to clasp them together. Her wrist throbbed where the tall man had grabbed her, and she knew there would be bruises tomorrow. If there was a tomorrow. If this was really over. "Someone call the police!" Sal shouted, already dialing. "Emma, honey, are you okay? Did they hurt you?" The young couple emerged from under their table, the girl crying, her boyfriend's arm around her. Mr. Chen had returned, peeking through the door cautiously before entering. Emma looked up to find Moretti standing in front of her. Up close, he was even more imposing. Tall, broad-shouldered, with an intensity in his dark eyes that made her breath catch for entirely different reasons than fear. "Are you hurt?" he asked, and his voice was gentler than she expected. Emma shook her head, not trusting herself to speak yet. Her throat felt tight, like she might cry or scream or laugh hysterically. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a shaky weakness and the slow, creeping realization of what had just happened. What could have happened? "That was incredibly foolish," Moretti continued, crouching down so he was at her eye level. "And incredibly brave. You might have saved my life." "I didn't," Emma started, then had to stop and swallow hard. "I didn't think. I couldn't let them." "I know." Something that might have been a smile touched his lips, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Most people would have run. You ran toward danger instead? That's rare. Sal rushed over with a glass of water, pressing it into Emma's hands. The police are on their way. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, Emma, you scared 10 years off my life. What were you thinking? She was thinking someone needed help, Moretti said, standing up. And she helped. Not many people would have done that. The next 30 minutes passed in a blur. Police officers arrived, their radios crackling, their questions coming fast and methodical. Emma gave her statement 3 times, each time feeling more surreal than the last. Yes, 2 men came in. Yes, one of them had a weapon. No, she didn't know them. No, she couldn't identify them clearly. It all happened so fast. She noticed that Moretti's statement was similarly vague. He described the men but offered no theories about why they'd targeted him. Wrong place, wrong time, he said with a shrug. Maybe they thought I was someone else. Case of mistaken identity. The detective taking his statement didn't look convinced, but without evidence or a clear motive, there wasn't much they could do. They took the weapon as evidence, took photos of the diner, took everyone's contact information. You should go to the hospital, get checked out, one of the officers told Emma. Make sure you're not injured. I'm fine, Emma insisted, even though her wrist was swelling and her hip felt like she'd been hit with a baseball bat. Really? I just want to go home. Sal insisted on closing early, sending everyone home. You've had enough excitement for one night, sweetheart. Take tomorrow off too. Paid. Emma wanted to argue. She needed the money, but she was too exhausted. She nodded numbly, grabbing her jacket and bag from the back room. When she emerged, Moretti was waiting by the door. The police had left. The diner was empty except for Sal cleaning up broken dishes in the back. I'd like to give you something, Moretti said, pulling out his wallet. For your trouble, for your bravery. No, Emma said quickly, holding up her hands. No, that's not necessary. I didn't do it for money. I know you didn't. That's exactly why I want to give it to you. He pulled out several bills. Emma caught a glimpse of hundreds and held them out. Please, you put yourself in danger for a stranger that deserves recognition. Emma stared at the money. Part of her wanted to take it desperately. She was 2 months behind on rent. Her student loans were in default. She ate ramen 4 days a week. That money could solve so many immediate problems. But something about taking it felt wrong, like it would change what had happened, turn a moment of instinct and courage into a transaction. I can't, she said softly. Thank you, but I can't. Moretti studied her for a long moment, something like respect flickering in his eyes. Then he nodded slowly and put the money back in his wallet. Instead, he pulled out a single bill, $500, and placed it on the nearest table. Tip for the excellent service, then, he said. Nothing to do with tonight. Just a generous customer appreciating good coffee and better meatloaf. Before Emma could protest, he was putting on his coat. You should take a cab home tonight, not the subway. It's late, and after what happened, he pulled out another bill, this time a 20, and pressed it into her hand. For the cab, non-negotiable. Emma found herself nodding, too tired to argue anymore. Moretti paused at the door, looking back at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. What's your name? Emma. Emma Hayes. Emma Hayes. He repeated it like he was committing it to memory. You're a very remarkable young woman, Emma Hayes. Thank you for tonight, I won't forget it. And then he was gone, stepping out into the rain. Through the window, Emma saw a sleek black car pull up immediately. Someone opened the door for him. He climbed in, and the car disappeared into the night. Did he leave the tip? Sal called from the back. Emma looked at the $500 on the table. Yeah, she said quietly. He left a tip. Sal came out, saw the money, and whistled. Well, at least something good came out of tonight. You take that, sweetheart. Lord knows you earned it. Emma picked up the bill with shaking hands. $500. It was more than she made in a week, sometimes 2. It would cover most of her rent. It would let her eat something other than ramen. It would give her a little breathing room in a life that never seemed to have enough air. She should feel grateful, relieved, happy even. Instead, she just felt unsettled. Like something had shifted tonight, some invisible line had been crossed and she couldn't quite figure out what it meant. The cab ride home went by in a daze. Emma stared out the window at the rain-slicked streets of Brooklyn, the lights blurring together in streaks of red and gold. Her neighborhood looked different somehow, though nothing had actually changed. Same bodegas, same graffiti, same groups of people huddled under awnings smoking and talking. Her building was a walk-up in Sunset Park, 5 stories of worn brick and fire escapes decorated with laundry lines and potted plants that somehow survived New York winters. Emma climbed the stairs slowly, every muscle in her body suddenly remembering that she'd been on her feet for 14 hours and had gotten into an altercation with two dangerous men. Her studio apartment was tiny, barely 400 square feet including the bathroom, but it was hers. Sort of. She'd inherited the lease from her mother along with everything else. The medical debt, the maxed-out credit cards, the student loans that Emma had co-signed when she'd naively believed she'd become a nurse and be able to pay them off easily. Emma locked the door behind her, deadbolt, chain, doorknob, and leaned against it, finally allowing herself to break down a little. Her hands were still shaking. Her wrist was definitely bruised, purple marks in the shape of fingers already forming. Her hip throbbed with every breath, but she was alive. She was home. She was okay. She heated up some leftover rice in the microwave, took 2 ibuprofen with tap water, and collapsed onto her bed without even changing out of her uniform. The adrenaline crash hit her like a wave, pulling her under into exhausted darkness. She dreamed of dark eyes and expensive watches, of coffee pots and weapons, of rain and danger, and a voice saying, "You're under my protection now." Emma woke at 3 in the morning to use the bathroom. On her way back to bed, half asleep, she noticed something white under her door. Her heart jumped into her throat, suddenly wide awake. She crept to the door silently listening. No sounds from the hallway, no shadows visible under the crack. Slowly, Emma bent down and picked up the small white card. It was thick, expensive paper, the kind you couldn't buy at any regular store. There was no name on it, no company logo, no address, just a phone number printed in simple black font, and below it in handwriting that was precise and controlled. "You're under our protection now." Emma's hands started shaking again. She looked at the door, still locked, chain still in place. Whoever had left this had done so silently, carefully, without disturbing her or any of her neighbors. She should call the police. She should be terrified. Instead, she felt something else, something she couldn't quite name, like standing on the edge of something vast and unknown, like the moment before you jump into water and you don't know how deep it goes. Emma looked at the card for a long time. Then she walked to her tiny kitchen table, sat down, and stared at the phone number in the dim light of her apartment. Outside, Brooklyn continued its endless rhythm. Somewhere out there, Vincent Moretti was in his own world, dealing with whatever consequences came from tonight's events. Somewhere out there, 2 men were nursing their injuries and planning whatever came next. And here, in this tiny studio apartment in Sunset Park, Emma Hayes sat with a mysterious card and the growing realization that her life had just become infinitely more complicated. The rain had stopped. Dawn was still hours away. The city hummed with its familiar sounds. Sirens in the distance, bass thumping from a car passing below, the rumble of the subway beneath the streets. Everything was different now. Emma could feel it in her bones, in the way her heart was beating, in the way the card seemed to almost burn between her fingers. She'd saved a stranger's life tonight, and somehow, she knew with absolute certainty, that single act of instinct and courage had changed everything. The question was, had it changed things for better or worse? Only time would tell. Emma finally went back to bed, tucking the card into her nightstand drawer. But she didn't sleep. She lay there in the darkness, listening to the city, feeling the bruises forming on her body and wondering what morning would bring, wondering if she'd just made the best decision of her life or the worst mistake, wondering who Vincent Moretti really was, and why those men had wanted to take him away, wondering what protection meant, and what price it might come with, but most of all, wondering if she'd ever feel normal again, or if normal was something that belonged to yesterday, to the version of Emma Hayes who'd woken up that morning with nothing more to worry about than rent and student loans and impossible dreams of nursing school. That Emma seemed like a different person now, someone younger, more naive, living in a simpler world. Tonight had cracked something open, and tomorrow Emma would have to figure out how to live in whatever came pouring through. Emma didn't sleep that night, not really. She drifted in and out of consciousness, her mind replaying the events at the diner in an endless loop. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the weapon gleaming under the fluorescent lights. She felt the coffee pot in her hand, heavy and hot. She heard that voice, "You're under my protection now," echoing in the darkness of her tiny apartment. When her alarm finally went off at 7, she felt like she'd been run over by a truck. Her wrist was swollen, the bruises a spectacular array of purple and yellow. Her hip had stiffened overnight, making every movement a reminder of what had happened. Sal had told her to take the day off, but Emma couldn't afford to lose the income. She got up, showered carefully around her injuries, and dressed in her spare uniform. The $500 tip sat on her kitchen counter, still folded exactly as Moretti had left it. Emma stared at it for a long moment before finally putting it in her wallet. She'd earned it, she told herself. Not for what happened, but as a tip, just like he'd said. A generous customer appreciating good service. Nothing more. The morning was crisp and clear, the kind of October day that made New York beautiful. The rain had washed everything clean and the sunlight seemed sharper somehow, more focused. Emma walked to the subway station, her messenger bag slung over her shoulder, trying to convince herself that everything was fine, normal, back to routine. But normal shattered the moment she rounded the corner onto her street that evening after her shift. There was a black SUV parked across from her building. Not unusual in itself. Plenty of people in the neighborhood had cars. But this one was different. The windows were tinted dark. The engine was running a soft purr that spoke of expensive machinery, and there was someone sitting in the driver's seat just waiting. Emma's steps slowed. Her heart rate picked up. She told herself she was being paranoid. It was just a car. People parked on streets. That's what streets were for. But as she approached her building, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. She fumbled with her keys, dropping them once before managing to unlock the door. Safe inside, she climbed the stairs quickly, her hip protesting with every step. When she reached her floor, Mrs. Chen from apartment 3C was in the hallway, watering the sad little plant she kept on a table by her door. "Emma, there you are," Mrs. Chen said, smiling. She was Mr. Chen's wife, a tiny woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. "Some men came by looking for you today." Emma's blood ran cold. "What kind of men?" "Oh, very polite, very well-dressed. They didn't come upstairs. They talked to Mr. Kowalski downstairs." Mrs. Chen's expression turned curious. "Is everything okay, dear? You look pale." "I'm fine," Emma lied, forcing a smile. "Just tired. Long shift. What did they want?" "I don't know. But Mr. Kowalski seemed very happy after they left. You should ask him." Emma thanked her and continued to her apartment, her mind racing. Men asking about her. Mr. Kowalski, her landlord, happy about something. The SUV outside, the card under her door. "You're under our protection now." She locked herself inside her apartment and went straight to the window, carefully pulling back the curtain just enough to peek out. The SUV was still there. As she watched, a second one pulled up and parked behind it. Emma's hands were shaking again. This wasn't her imagination. This was real. This was happening. Her phone rang, making her jump so badly she almost dropped it. Unknown number. Emma stared at it for 3 rings before finally answering. "Hello? Miss Hayes?" A male voice, professional and polite. "My name is Marco Rinaldi. I work for Mr. Moretti. He would like to speak with you." Emma's mouth went dry. I don't think that's a good idea. I understand your hesitation." Marco's voice was smooth, practiced. "But Mr. Moretti is quite insistent. He wants to personally thank you for your actions last night and discuss your safety going forward." "My safety?" Emma's voice came out higher than she intended. "What does that mean? Perhaps that's a conversation better had in person." "I'm downstairs, Miss Hayes. Whenever you're ready, I can drive you to meet with Mr. Moretti. Or if you prefer, he can come to you, though that might draw more attention to your building than you'd like." Emma looked out the window again. One of the SUVs flashed its lights once, as if in greeting. "And if I refuse?" There was a pause. "Mr. Moretti would be disappointed, but he's not a man who forces people into conversations. However, I should mention that your landlord has been asking about the overdue rent on your apartment. 2 months, I believe. Mr. Moretti has taken care of that for you." Seemed like the least he could do. Emma felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. "He what?" "Your rent is current, Miss Hayes. 3 months paid in advance, in fact." Mr. Kowalski was quite pleased. Anger flared hot in Emma's chest, cutting through the fear. "He had no right. He had every right." Marco interrupted gently. "You saved his life. This is how we show gratitude. And truthfully, Miss Hayes, this is about more than gratitude now. Those men who came to the diner, they saw you. They know who you are. Mr. Moretti takes his responsibilities very seriously. He considers you under his care now, whether you accept it or not." Emma closed her eyes, pressing her forehead against the cool glass of the window. This couldn't be happening. 24 hours ago, her biggest problem was figuring out how to scrape together rent money. Now she had mysterious men paying her bills and parking outside her building. "Just a conversation," Marco continued. 1 hour of your time. You can ask any questions you want. If after that you want nothing to do with us, Mr. Moretti will respect that decision. But he does want to talk to you. Please, Miss Hayes. Emma thought about the card in her nightstand, the phone number she'd been staring at all day. Part of her had known this moment was coming. Where? She asked quietly. There's a restaurant in Carroll Gardens. Piccolo Paradiso. Very nice place. Closed tonight for a private event, so you'll have privacy. I'll drive you there, wait while you talk, and drive you home after. You have my word, you'll be perfectly safe. Emma laughed, but it came out bitter. The word of a stranger. That's supposed to reassure me? The word of a man who works for Vincent Moretti, Marco replied. In our world, Miss Hayes, that means something. Our word is our bond. It's all we have. Our world. Like there was Emma's world, of student debt and double shifts in studio apartments, and then there was this other world, operating in the shadows, with its own rules and codes. Give me 20 minutes, Emma said. I need to change. Of course, I'll be waiting downstairs. Emma hung up and stood in the middle of her apartment, her mind spinning. She should call the police. She should tell someone where she was going. She should do 100 responsible, sensible things. Instead, she went to her closet and pulled out the one nice outfit she owned. Black pants and a dark green blouse she'd bought for her mother's funeral. She changed quickly, ran a brush through her hair, and looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. Her reflection stared back. 23 years old, tired eyes, fresh bruises on her wrist. Still just a waitress from Brooklyn. Still Emma Hayes. But something in her expression had changed. There was a hardness there now, a wariness that hadn't existed 2 days ago. She grabbed her jacket and her phone, made sure her pepper spray was in her pocket, not that it would help much if things went wrong, and headed downstairs. Mr. Kowalski was in the lobby, sweeping near the mailboxes. He looked up when Emma appeared, his usually sour expression brightening immediately. Emma, I was hoping to catch you. About the rent. I know, Emma said shortly. It's been taken care of. Yes, such a relief. I was going to have to start eviction proceedings next week, you understand? Nothing personal, but business is business. He leaned in conspiratorially. Your uncle is a very generous man, very proper. I'm glad you have family looking out for you. Uncle. Emma almost laughed. So that was the story they'd told. A generous uncle taking care of his niece. Nice and neat and completely false. Yes, she said flatly. Very generous. Excuse me, Mr. Kowalski. She pushed through the door before he could say anything else. The SUV's passenger door opened as she approached and a man stepped out. He was in his early 40s, Emma guessed, with salt and pepper hair and a face that managed to look both friendly and intimidating at the same time. He wore a dark suit that fit perfectly, and his shoes were polished to a mirror shine. Miss Hayes, I'm Marco. He extended his hand, and Emma shook it cautiously. His grip was firm but not aggressive. Thank you for agreeing to meet with Mr. Moretti. I promise this will be as painless as possible. Painless, Emma repeated. Interesting choice of words. Marco's lips twitched with something that might have been amusement. Poor phrasing. I meant as stress-free as possible. Please, get in. It's not a long drive. Emma climbed into the back seat of the SUV. The interior was spotless. Leather seats, tinted windows. There was another man in the driver's seat who nodded at her in the rearview mirror, but didn't speak. Marco got in beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. How are you feeling? Any injuries from last night? Bruised, Emma said. But okay. That's good. What you did was incredibly brave. Incredibly stupid, but incredibly brave. Mr. Moretti hasn't stopped talking about it. The SUV pulled smoothly into traffic heading toward Carroll Gardens. Emma watched the familiar street slide by, her neighborhood giving way to slightly nicer blocks, brownstones with well-maintained stoops, trees that actually looked healthy. What does he want? Emma asked. Really? Marco considered the question carefully. To thank you. To make sure you understand the situation you've inadvertently become part of. To offer his protection, which, in your position, you'll need. And what situation is that exactly? You put yourself between Mr. Moretti and people who wish him harm. Those people now see you as connected to him. That makes you a potential target. Mr. Moretti doesn't take those things lightly. He protects what's his. I'm not his, Emma said sharply. You became his the moment you threw that coffee pot, Marco replied, not unkindly. You stepped into his world. You can't step back out that easily. Emma wanted to argue. but something in Marco's tone told her he was just stating facts as he understood them. This wasn't a threat. It was just reality. A reality she'd stumbled into without understanding the rules. The restaurant was exactly what Marco had described. A small, elegant Italian place with dark wood and white tablecloths. The sign said closed, but lights were on inside. Marco opened Emma's door and gestured toward the entrance. "He's waiting inside. I'll be out here if you need anything." Emma's legs felt unsteady as she walked to the door. It opened before she could knock, and a different man, older, with kind eyes, gestured her inside. The restaurant was beautiful. Candles flickered on the tables. The walls were decorated with photos of Italy, rolling hills, ancient buildings, vineyard. It smelled like fresh bread and herbs and wine. Vincent Moretti sat at a table near the back, and Emma's breath caught when she saw him. He looked different than he had at the diner. More relaxed, maybe, though there was still that air of controlled power around him. He wore a black shirt with no tie, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing muscular forearms. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it. When he saw Emma, he stood immediately, his expression difficult to read. "Miss Hayes, thank you for coming." His voice was exactly as she remembered, quiet but commanding. "Please sit. Can I get you anything? Wine? Water? Giuseppe makes the best carbonara in Brooklyn if you're hungry." Emma sat carefully, hyper-aware of his presence across the table. "Water is fine." Moretti gestured, and the older man, Giuseppe, apparently, brought over a bottle of sparkling water and 2 glasses. Then he disappeared into the back, leaving them alone. The silence stretched for a moment. Moretti poured water for both of them, his movements precise and graceful. Finally, he looked up and met Emma's eyes directly. "How's your wrist?" Emma reflexively touched the bruises, now partially hidden by her sleeve. "Sore, but it'll heal. I'm sorry you were hurt." Something flickered across his face. Genuine regret. "That should never have happened. You should never have been put in that position." "I put myself there," Emma said. "Nobody forced me." "No, you chose to help a stranger when you could have run. When you should have run." Moretti leaned back, studying her. Why? Emma had asked herself that question 100 times since last night. "I don't know. Instinct. My mom was a nurse before she got sick. She always said if you can help, you help. I guess it stuck. Your mother was a wise woman." "She was." Emma's throat tightened. "She died 18 months ago. Cancer. That's why I'm drowning in medical debt instead of finishing nursing school. But I guess you already know that, don't you?" Moretti didn't deny it. "I make it a point to know about people who saved my life." Emma Hayes, 23, worked 3 jobs while taking care of her mother during her illness. Tried to continue nursing school but had to drop out when the bills became too much. Currently working double shifts at Murphy's Diner to try to stay afloat. No other family. No boyfriend. Lives alone in a studio apartment in Sunset Park. Hearing her life summarized so clinically made Emma feel exposed. Vulnerable. Sounds pretty pathetic when you put it that way. "It sounds remarkable," Moretti corrected. "You've been surviving on your own, carrying burdens that would crush most people, and you still had enough courage and compassion to risk your life for a stranger. That's not pathetic, Miss Hayes. That's extraordinary." Emma didn't know what to say to that. She took a sip of water, buying time. "Why did they come after you? Those men at the diner?" "Because I made decisions they didn't agree with. Because there are people in this city who think I'm becoming too powerful, too influential. Because power struggles are messy and sometimes they spill over into public spaces." Moretti's expression was carefully neutral. "I should have been more careful. Should have seen it coming. Should never have put other people at risk." "What do you do, Mr. Moretti?" Emma asked. "For a living, I mean." A slight smile touched his lips. "I'm a businessman. I own several legitimate enterprises. Restaurants, construction companies, import-export businesses. I also facilitate certain arrangements between parties who prefer to operate outside traditional channels." "You're being vague." "I'm being honest within the constraints of plausible deniability." He leaned forward slightly. "Let me be clearer. I'm a man with significant influence in certain communities. I solve problems. I provide protection. I ensure that agreements are honored and that business, both legitimate and otherwise, runs smoothly. People come to me when they need things done, and I make them happen." Emma processed this. "You're in the Mafia." Moretti's expression didn't change. "That's a term from movies and television. The reality is more complicated. But yes, if you want simple labels, I operate within a certain organizational structure that has roots in my family's history and traditions. At least he wasn't lying to her. Emma appreciated that, even as her stomach twisted with anxiety. And now I'm connected to you because I threw coffee at someone. Yes, that's insane. That's reality. Moretti's voice was gentle but firm. The men who came to the diner report to a man named Castellano. He's been trying to expand his territory into areas I control. That confrontation was his way of sending a message. Thanks to you, that message failed, which means he's angry, humiliated, and looking for ways to retaliate. Against you, against me, against anyone associated with me, including unfortunately brave young women who throw coffee pots. Emma felt cold despite the warmth of the restaurant. So what happens now? Now, I make sure you're safe. Marco has men watching your building. You'll be escorted to and from work. If anyone approaches you, anyone at all that you don't know, you call the number on the card I left you immediately. You paid my rent. I did. You had no right. I had every right, Moretti said, echoing Marco's words. You saved my life. In my culture, that creates an obligation. A debt that must be repaid. I don't want to be in debt to you, Emma said. I don't want to be part of this world. I understand. But sometimes we don't get to choose. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope, placing it on the table between them. There's $50,000 in here. Enough to pay off your mother's medical debts, cover your student loans, give you breathing room to go back to school. Take it. It's yours. No strings, no obligations beyond what already exists. Emma stared at the envelope like it was radioactive. $50,000. It would change everything. She could go back to school, stop working double shifts, actually sleep at night without worrying about eviction notices and debt collectors. But taking it would mean accepting this connection, accepting that she was now part of Vincent Moretti's world, for better or worse. I can't, she whispered. Why not? Because, Emma struggled to articulate what she was feeling. Because it would mean this is real. All of this. The danger, the protection, the everything. As long as I don't take your money, I can pretend I'm still just Emma Hayes, waitress. That my life is still my own. Moretti was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than before. Your life is still your own, Emma. I'm not trying to take that from you. I'm trying to keep you alive long enough to live it. By surrounding me with bodyguards? By paying my bills? That's not freedom. Freedom is staying alive to make your own choices. He pushed the envelope closer. This isn't payment for what you did. This is me trying to give you options. Education, security, the ability to build the life you want instead of just surviving day to day. Emma's hands were shaking. She wanted to take it. God, she wanted to take it so badly. But something in her rebelled against the idea, against becoming dependent on a man whose world operated in shadows, where casual conversations happened in closed restaurants and questions were answered with polite vagueness. I need to think about it, she finally said. Moretti nodded slowly, pulling the envelope back. That's fair. The offer stands whenever you're ready. He paused. But the protection isn't optional, Emma. Whether you take the money or not, whether you want it or not, you're under my protection now. That's not negotiable, do you understand? What if I go to the police? And tell them what? That you're being protected against your will? They'll laugh you out of the station. Or worse, they'll start investigating, and you'll end up caught between me and them, which is the last place you want to be. His expression was serious, but not threatening. I'm not your enemy, Emma, but I'm also not giving you a choice about this. Your safety is now my responsibility. Accept that, even if you can't accept anything else. Emma felt trapped, cornered by circumstances beyond her control. This isn't fair. No, Moretti agreed. It's not. But it's the situation we're in. I didn't ask for you to save my life. You didn't ask to be put in danger. But here we are. We make the best of it. Giuseppe emerged from the kitchen carrying 2 plates of pasta that looked and smelled incredible. He set them down without a word and disappeared again. You should eat, Moretti said. Giuseppe will be offended if you don't at least try his carbonara. And trust me, you don't want to offend Giuseppe. Despite everything, Emma felt a small smile tug at her lips. Is that a threat? It's practical advice. He's 83 and terrifying when he's insulted. Moretti picked up his fork. Please, eat. We can talk about other things. You can ask me questions. Or we can just eat in silence. Whatever makes you more comfortable. Emma picked up her fork hesitantly and took a bite of the carbonara. It was, admittedly, the best thing she'd tasted in months, maybe years. Rich and creamy and perfectly seasoned. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Then Emma asked, "Do you have family?" Moretti looked surprised by the question. "A younger sister, Elena. She lives in California, teaches history at a university. Wants nothing to do with this life. I respect that. Parents? Dead. My father 15 years ago, my mother 10. Heart problems, both of them." Something sad flickered in his eyes. This life takes a toll, not just on the people in it, but on the people who love them. Is that a warning? It's an observation. Moretti set down his fork. You asked why those men came after me. The honest answer is because this is the life I inherited. My grandfather built this organization. My father expanded it. Now it's mine to maintain, to grow, to protect. I didn't choose it, but I've made peace with it. Do you like it? The power? The control? Moretti considered the question carefully. I like being able to help people. The legitimate businesses I run employ hundreds of families. The protection I provide keeps neighborhoods safe from worse elements. The problems I solve prevent escalation into real problems. Do I like the danger? The isolation? The fact that I can't trust most people? He shook his head. No, but it's who I am. Emma found herself fascinated despite herself. This man was a contradiction. Dangerous but thoughtful. Powerful but lonely. Nothing like the stereotypes she'd expected. Why did you come to Murphy's that night, of all the places in Brooklyn? I like it there, it's real. No pretense, no performance. Just regular people living their lives. Sometimes I need that reminder that the world is bigger than my responsibilities. He smiled slightly. Plus, Sal's meatloaf really is good. They finished eating and Giuseppe appeared to clear the plates, nodding approvingly when he saw Emma's empty plate. He brought espresso without being asked, strong and bitter and perfect. I need to know something, Emma said as she sipped the coffee. Those men, will they come after me? Not if they're smart, Moretti replied. By now, word has spread that you're under my protection. Touching you would be declaring war on me. Most people aren't that foolish. Most people? Castellano is unpredictable. He makes emotional decisions, which makes him dangerous. That's why I'm being cautious. Moretti finished his espresso and set down the cup. I won't lie to you, Emma. There's some risk, but I'm doing everything I can to minimize it. Emma felt the weight of his words settling over her. This was her life now. Risk, protection, watching over her shoulder, all because she'd done what her mother had taught her. Help when you can. I should get home, she said quietly. I have an early shift tomorrow. Of course. Moretti stood, and Emma followed. Marco will drive you. And Emma? He waited until she looked at him. Thank you for coming tonight, for listening. I know this isn't what you wanted. Nothing about the last 2 days is what I wanted, Emma replied. But I guess we don't always get to choose. No, Moretti said softly. We don't. Marco drove Emma home in silence. She was grateful for it. Her mind was too full for conversation. When they pulled up outside her building, she saw the other SUV still parked across the street. They'll be here all night, Marco said. Every night until Mr. Moretti says otherwise. You're safe, Miss Hayes. Emma nodded, too tired to argue. She climbed the stairs to her apartment, locked herself inside, and collapsed onto her bed fully clothed. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Sleep well. You're safe. VM. Emma stared at the message for a long time. Then she got up, went to her laptop, and searched Vincent Moretti, Brooklyn. The results were sparse but telling. A few mentions in news articles about community investment. A photo from a charity event. Moretti in a tuxedo shaking hands with the mayor. References to his construction companies, his restaurants. Nothing explicit, but reading between the lines, the picture was clear. Vincent Moretti was powerful, connected, influential, the kind of man who operated in spaces where official records didn't reach. Emma closed her laptop and looked out the window at the SUV below. Protection, prison, maybe both. She'd saved a stranger's life and become part of a world she didn't understand. Now she had to figure out how to survive it, and whether she could do so without losing herself in the process. Outside, Brooklyn continued its endless rhythm. Inside, Emma Hayes lay awake in the darkness, wondering what tomorrow would bring, and whether she'd made the biggest mistake of her life, or somehow stumbled into something that might actually save her. Only time would tell. 3 weeks passed, and Emma's life became a strange balancing act between two realities. In one reality, she was still Emma Hayes, waitress at Murphy's Diner. She still worked her shifts, still poured coffee and took orders, still cleaned tables and made small talk with regulars. Mr. Chen still came in every night with his newspaper. Sal still called her honey and worried about her working too hard. The young couple from that night never returned, but new customers filled the booths and life at the diner continued its familiar rhythm. In the other reality, the one that existed in the spaces between, Emma was constantly aware of the black SUV parked across the street, the well-dressed men who seemed to materialize whenever she left work, the way certain people in the neighborhood now nodded at her with a new kind of respect that made her uncomfortable. She hadn't taken Moretti's money. The envelope still sat in her apartment, untouched, a constant reminder of choices she hadn't made. But she'd noticed other changes. Her electricity bill had been mysteriously reduced. The bodega owner on her corner suddenly refused to let her pay for groceries. Her landlord had stopped mentioning rent entirely. Moretti's influence was everywhere, invisible but undeniable, wrapping around her life like morning fog. Emma told herself she hated it, told herself she was waiting for the right moment to confront him, to demand he stop interfering. But another part of her, the part that had lain awake at night worrying about eviction notices and shut-off warnings, felt a guilty relief she couldn't quite suppress. It was a Tuesday evening, 3 weeks and 2 days after the incident, when Vincent Moretti walked into Murphy's Diner again. Emma was refilling the salt shakers when the bell chimed. She looked up automatically, and her breath caught. He stood in the doorway, dressed more casually than before. Dark jeans, a gray sweater, a leather jacket that probably cost more than her monthly salary. He looked almost normal if you ignored the way he carried himself, that quiet confidence that commanded attention without demanding it. Their eyes met across the diner. Emma felt her heart skip in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Sal noticed him too. "Mr. Moretti? Welcome back. Your usual booth? If it's available, Sal. Thank you." Vincent's voice was warm, genuine. He walked to booth 12, his booth apparently, and sat down. Emma took a moment to steady herself before approaching with her notepad. "Coffee? Please." He looked up at her, and something soft flickered in his dark eyes. "How are you, Emma?" "Fine." She poured coffee with hands that were almost steady. "And you?" "Better now." The words could have sounded like a line, but something in his tone made them feel sincere. "The meatloaf still good here. Best in Brooklyn, according to Giuseppe." Emma surprised herself by smiling slightly. Vincent's lips curved. "Giuseppe has strong opinions about food. I'll trust his judgment. Meatloaf, please. And maybe some of Sal's apple pie if there's any left." Emma wrote down the order, acutely aware of how normal this felt. How strange it was that 3 weeks ago this man had been a stranger. And now, what was he now? Not a stranger. Not a friend. Something undefined that existed in the space between protection and intrusion. She brought him his meal, and he thanked her with that quiet courtesy that seemed to be as natural to him as breathing. Emma went back to her other tables, but she was constantly aware of him sitting there, eating slowly, occasionally checking his phone, but mostly just existing in the space. The dinner rush came and went. Customers filtered in and out. By 9 o'clock, the diner had quieted to just a handful of regulars. Vincent was still there, working on his second cup of coffee, reading something on his tablet. Emma was wiping down a table near his booth when he spoke. "Can you sit for a minute?" She glanced at Sal, who waved her off. "Go ahead, honey, it's slow." Emma slid into the booth across from Vincent, feeling awkward and too aware of how close they were in the small space. "Is something wrong?" "No, I just—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I wanted to see how you're doing. Really doing. Not the polite answer you give when I ask in front of other people." Emma studied him. In the fluorescent light of the diner, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the slight shadow of exhaustion that makeup or money couldn't quite hide. "I'm adjusting," she said honestly. "It's strange, knowing people are watching, feeling like I'm not quite in control of my own life anymore." "I know the feeling." Vincent's expression was rueful. "I've lived with it for 15 years. It doesn't get easier, but you learn to adapt." "Is that supposed to be comforting?" "It's supposed to be honest." He wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. "I could tell you it's temporary, that eventually things will go back to normal, but that would be a lie. This is your normal now, at least for the foreseeable future." Emma appreciated the honesty, even as it made her chest tight. "Do you ever regret it, the life you have?" Vincent was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes distant. "Every day, and never. It's complicated. Explain it to me." He seemed surprised by her directness. But then he leaned back, considering. I grew up in this world. My grandfather started with nothing, came to America from Sicily with $5 and a dream, built a small import business that grew into something bigger. My father expanded it, made connections, gained influence. By the time I was born, the Moretti name meant something in Brooklyn. Emma listened, fascinated despite herself. I was supposed to go to law school, Vincent continued. That was my plan. Be the legitimate face of the family, help move everything into legal channels. Then my older brother Marco, not the Marco you met, different Marco, he was killed. Accident, officially, but we knew better. Someone wanted to send a message to my father. His jaw tightened slightly. I was 23, same age you are now, and suddenly I had to choose. Walk away and let the family business crumble, or step up and learn how to survive in a world I hadn't fully understood until that moment. You chose to stay. I chose loyalty, responsibility, family. Vincent's eyes met hers. Same reasons you dropped out of nursing school to take care of your mother. Sometimes we don't choose our paths. They choose us. The comparison hit Emma hard. She'd never thought of it that way. But he was right. She'd made her choice out of love and duty just as he had. The difference was the world they'd chosen to operate in. But you have power, Emma said. You could walk away now if you wanted. Could I? Vincent's smile was sad. The moment I try to leave, I become a target, a weakness someone can exploit, and everyone connected to me becomes vulnerable. My sister in California is safe because I'm here, maintaining the balance. If I disappeared, she'd be used against me. That's how this works. Emma felt a chill. That's a prison. It's a responsibility I accepted. And honestly, he leaned forward slightly. I'm good at it. I protect people. I keep neighborhoods safe. I make sure families can run their businesses without being exploited. There's honor in that, even if the methods aren't always conventional. Before Emma could respond, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw an unknown number. Her stomach tightened. Unknown numbers hadn't been good news lately. Answer it, Vincent said quietly, his expression suddenly alert. Emma swiped to answer. Hello? Emma Hayes? A woman's voice, professional and cold. This is Detective Lisa Morrison with the NYPD. We need to talk to you about an ongoing investigation. Emma's eyes widened. She looked at Vincent, who had gone very still. An investigation? Into organized criminal activity in Brooklyn. Specifically, into Vincent Moretti and his known associates. You've been seen in his company multiple times. We'd like to ask you some questions. Can you come to the precinct tomorrow morning? Emma's mouth went dry. I don't know anything about. We'll determine that when we talk. 10 a.m. tomorrow. Here's the address. The detective rattled off a location. Don't be late, Miss Hayes. And don't discuss this conversation with anyone, especially not with Mr. Moretti. The line went dead. Emma set her phone down slowly, her hands trembling. The police want to talk to me. About you. Vincent's expression didn't change, but something hardened in his eyes. That was inevitable. Castellano must have made noise, drawn official attention. They're looking for leverage. What do I do? You go. You answer their questions honestly. You tell them you're a waitress who witnessed an incident and that I've been grateful. Nothing more. His voice was calm, steady. They can't prove anything because you don't know anything. You're not part of my organization. You're a civilian who did a good deed. But they'll ask about the protection, the men watching my building. You tell them you felt unsafe after the incident, and a grateful customer offered to ensure your security. That's not illegal. Vincent reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers but not quite touching. Emma, listen to me. They're going to try to scare you, pressure you, make you feel like you're in trouble, but you're not. You haven't done anything wrong, except refuse to cooperate. You're not refusing anything, you're simply telling the truth. You don't have information about my business dealings because you're not involved in them. His eyes held hers. Trust me on this. I've been through it before. Emma pulled her hand back, wrapping her arms around herself. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Getting caught between you and everything else. I know. And I'm sorry. Vincent's voice was genuine. But you'll get through it. Tomorrow you go to the police, you answer their questions, and you walk out. Then life continues. Does it? Emma's voice cracked slightly. Or does it just get more complicated? Vincent didn't have an answer for that. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken things filling the space between them. Finally, Emma stood. I should finish my shift. Emma. She paused, looking back at him. Vincent's expression was intense, concerned. If you need anything, advice, support, just someone to talk to, call me, day or night. I meant what I said about protection. That includes protecting you from the fallout of knowing me. Emma nodded and walked away, her mind spinning. She finished her shift on autopilot, barely aware of the customers or Sal's concerned questions. When closing time came, Marco was waiting outside to drive her home, as he had been every night for 3 weeks. In the SUV, Emma asked, "Did you know about the police?" Marco's expression in the rearview mirror was carefully neutral. "We anticipated it. Moretti prepared you as well as he could. He didn't prepare me for how scared I'd feel. Fear is natural. Just remember, you're not the target. You're collateral. They want Moretti, not you. Tell the truth, and they'll have nothing." But as Emma lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, she wondered if the truth was really that simple. The truth was that she'd saved Vincent Moretti's life, that she thought about him more than she should, that some part of her was drawn to his quiet intensity, his unexpected gentleness, the way he carried the weight of his world with dignity. The truth was that she was starting to care, and that scared her more than any police interrogation. The next morning, Emma dressed in her most professional outfit and took the subway to the precinct. Detective Morrison was exactly what Emma expected. Sharp-eyed, no-nonsense, with a skepticism that radiated from every pore. The interrogation room was small, cold, smelling faintly of industrial cleaner. Emma sat across from the detective, trying to keep her hands from shaking. "Tell me about Vincent Moretti," Detective Morrison began, and Emma did. She told the truth, the incident at the diner, Moretti's gratitude, the protection he'd offered. She left nothing out, but she also added nothing. Just facts, delivered calmly. "And you expect me to believe you know nothing about his criminal activities?" "I'm a waitress," Emma said simply. "He's a customer who was grateful. That's all I know." The detective leaned forward. "Emma, Vincent Moretti is dangerous. He's connected to organized crime, racketeering, extortion. People around him get hurt. We can protect you, but you have to help us." "Protect me from what?" "He hasn't threatened me. He's been nothing but respectful. That's how people like him operate. They make you feel safe until suddenly you're complicit." Detective Morrison's eyes bored into Emma's. "We're offering you a way out. Witness protection if necessary. A clean break from this situation." Emma thought about her tiny apartment, her shifts at the diner, her dreams of nursing school. She thought about Vincent sitting in booth 12, talking about responsibility and family. She thought about the choice she was being asked to make. "I appreciate the offer," Emma said carefully, "but I don't have anything to tell you. I'm not part of his world. I'm just trying to live my life." The detective studied her for a long moment, then sat back with obvious frustration. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe," Emma agreed, "but it's mine to make." She walked out of the precinct an hour later, her legs shaky but her resolve firm. She'd made her choice, even if she didn't fully understand why. Her phone buzzed. "Vincent, how did it go?" Emma stared at the message for a long moment before responding. "I told them the truth. They weren't happy." His reply came immediately. "Thank you. For everything. Dinner tonight? We should talk." Emma hesitated, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. She was crossing lines she'd promised herself she wouldn't cross, getting more involved, more entangled. But maybe she'd cross those lines the moment she threw that coffee pot. "Okay," she texted back. "Where?" The answer was simple. "I'll pick you up at 7. And Emma, standing on a Brooklyn street corner with the autumn sun warm on her face, realized she wasn't afraid anymore. Or maybe she was, but she was choosing to move forward anyway. Whatever came next, she'd face it with her eyes open. The crisis came on a cold November morning, exactly 1 month after the incident at Murphy's Diner. Emma was walking to work when Marco's car pulled up abruptly beside her. His usual calm demeanor was replaced by urgency. "Get in now!" Her heart raced as she climbed into the SUV. "What's wrong?" "Castellano made his move. There's going to be a confrontation tonight. Moretti wants you somewhere safe until it's over." Emma's hands went cold. "Where is he?" "Handling it. My job is getting you to take me to him." Emma's voice was firm, surprising even herself. Marco's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror. "That's not a good idea. I don't care. Take me to Vincent." Something in her tone must have convinced him. 20 minutes later, they arrived at an upscale building in Park Slope. Marco led her to a penthouse office where Vincent stood by floor-to-ceiling windows, phone pressed to his ear, his expression harder than she'd ever seen it. He turned when she entered, surprise flickering across his features. Emma, you shouldn't be here. Neither should you be handling this alone. She crossed the room, her fear transforming into determination. What's happening? Vincent ended his call, studying her intently. Castellanos planning something for tonight. I'm trying to prevent it from escalating. How? By meeting him, negotiating, finding a solution that doesn't put innocent people at risk. His voice was tight with tension. But there are no guarantees. Emma moved closer. Then don't go alone. Emma, listen to me. She placed her hand on his arm, feeling the tension coiled beneath. You've spent a month protecting me. Let me help you now. Not by fighting. I'm not built for that world. But by being there. By reminding you that there's something worth coming back to. Vincent's eyes softened, his hand covering hers. You don't understand what you're asking. I understand perfectly. I'm choosing this. Choosing you. Not the power or the danger. Just you, Vincent. The man who talks about responsibility and honor. Who protects his neighborhood. Who sits in a diner booth eating meatloaf because it reminds him there's more to life than business. For the first time since she'd known him, Vincent Moretti looked genuinely vulnerable. If I let you stay, if something happens, then we face it together. Emma's voice was steady. I'm done being protected from the edges of your life. If I'm part of this world now, then I'm all in. But on my terms. Vincent pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers. Your terms? I keep working at the diner. I go back to nursing school when I'm ready. I maintain who I am. She looked up at him. And you let me in. Really in. No more vague answers or protective distance. If we're doing this, whatever this is, we do it honestly. A genuine smile touched his lips. Deal. The meeting that night was tense but ultimately successful. Vincent negotiated a truce. Territories respected, debts settled, honor maintained. Emma waited in his car with Marco, her heart in her throat until Vincent emerged 2 hours later, exhausted but unharmed. In the weeks that followed, Emma's life transformed in ways she hadn't expected. She enrolled in nursing school part-time, funded by her own money. She'd finally accepted Vincent's envelope, but only as a loan she insisted on repaying. She kept her shifts at Murphy's, finding balance between her two worlds. Vincent became a constant presence, not controlling or overwhelming, but steady. They had dinner twice a week, sometimes at expensive restaurants, sometimes at Murphy's where it all began. They talked about everything, her dreams, his responsibilities, the complicated reality they were building together. 6 months after throwing a coffee pot that changed her life, Emma Hayes stood at a community health clinic that Vincent had helped fund. She was doing her nursing clinical rotation, helping people from both worlds, the wealthy from Park Slope and the struggling families from Sunset Park. Vincent arrived as her shift ended, leaning against his car with that slight smile that still made her heart skip. How was your day? He asked as she approached. Long, rewarding, real. Emma smiled, taking his hand. How was yours? Complicated, but better now. They walked together through Brooklyn streets as twilight fell. Two people from different worlds who'd found unexpected connection in the space between. Emma knew the future was uncertain, knew there would be challenges and difficult choices ahead. But she'd learned something important over these months. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose love in the face of fear, hope in the face of complexity, and connection in a world that tries to keep people apart. She'd saved Vincent Moretti's life with a coffee pot and her courage. In return, he'd given her the strength to save herself, to pursue her dreams while staying true to who she was. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was real, messy, complicated, and entirely theirs. And as they disappeared into the Brooklyn night together, Emma Hayes knew she'd made the right choice. Not the easy one, but the right one. And sometimes, that's all that matters.